not everybody. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I call the honourable member Tracy Martin.
Kia ora, Mr. Speaker. Thank you very much. I rise on behalf of New Zealand First to speak in favour of this bill, and I do so because there is common sense in this bill. This is about debt reduction. This is about people actually facing their responsibilities, no matter where they are on the planet, and saying, we owe this money to the New Zealand public and we will repay it. However, it disappoints us that there are wider mechanisms, and for a short moment there I was very afraid I was going to actually agree with the Honourable John Banks, but I'm pleased to say, no, I don't. But there were wider things that could be done to actually reduce the $12 billion worth of student debt here, and they are not all punitive. However, let's just take the repayment holiday that is in this bill to start with. And I want to address some of the comments that my Green colleague, the member from the Green Party, has made. Let us not forget that the New Zealand overseas-based borrowers in the current repayment holiday, they don't just get an interest-free period, they don't have to make a repayment. But New Zealand students, New Zealand graduates who stay in New Zealand do not get the benefit of any break from their repayments. If they are working and they are being paid above the threshold, no matter what happens in their daily lives, they cannot apply for a break from that repayment, whether it be 1 year or whether it be 3 years. And considering that 56% of the people affected by the student loan scheme are women, I have already outlined instances where we believe that it would be beneficial for the repayment holiday to apply to New Zealand-based graduates just as much as it applies to overseas-based graduates. The other part of the bill that we find very interesting, and I got to say, the bit that surprises me, let's just touch on that first. I'm new here, and I realise that I'm new here, but I certainly didn't come into the House thinking that we passed legislation after it had already been implemented by a government department. So I find that particularly interesting, somewhat disturbing. I hope it's an anomaly, but I'm picking up that possibly there's a trend here. So it's certainly something that New Zealand First will be keeping our eye on. We seem to be pushing through legislation in this House to meet predetermined timelines that suit other people, and we heard about Fonterra earlier this evening. I want to quote the Honourable Maurice Williamson from the second reading of this bill, and at that time he said the main purpose of this bill is to improve efficiency and the fairness of the student loan scheme. So I've just touched on the fact that actually overseas-based New Zealand graduates have something going for them that New Zealanders who stay here and work here and keep their skills here don't get. But the next part is around that, around the situation, sir, where the repayment holiday is attached to the individual. And again, I touched on that at the committee stage of this bill. New Zealand First believes that the repayment holiday should be attached to the loan. If you gain the loan and you do what we ask of you, which is to repay it, if you've had to take a repayment holiday during that period because your circumstances, and I used the example of a woman, particularly in her 20s, has got a student loan, has graduated, gone and got employment, got married, has had her first child, a year's break there while the new family sorts out its finances, sir. She doesn't stop working necessarily, they just need to resort their finances. And over time, after that year's repayment holiday, she comes back and pays off that loan. Now, what is normal? It's quite common in this day and age that a woman then in her 40s who has raised her family goes back for further or higher education to improve her own circumstances, the circumstances of her family or whatever. Now let's just say, and the example I used was, that if that woman in her 40s has now got a student loan, she's back out working, but perhaps her husband gets ill. Perhaps she needs to take a repayment holiday again. She's proved herself to be a good debtor, sir. She's already proved herself to be a responsible New Zealand citizen. Surely, by paying off that loan and proving herself to us, she should have the benefit of being able to, in those circumstances, take another repayment holiday. So I think that's something that I believe this bill will be back in the House, sir. I believe there will be further amendments, and at that time, New Zealand First will actually cast its eye and put some contribution towards those sort of thoughts, sir. The other part we need to remember is there's $12 billion worth of student debt. My understanding is it's not all overdue debt. It's not all debt of people who happen to be overseas. It's just $12 billion worth of debt in total. And if this bill and the amendments of this bill had considered about how we could reduce that in a wider context, sir, and if it had looked at the New Zealand First dollar-for-dollar debt repayment scheme, that would have brought in $6 billion, the same amount of money we're selling assets for. The same amount of money, sir, that we're actually putting up the sale of our state-owned assets to bring in something between $5 and $7 billion if the New Zealand First dollar-for-dollar debt reduction scheme was applied now to this $12 billion worth of debt, we could keep our power stations, sir. We would actually, and not only that, we would have those skills back here in New Zealand. They would be retained in New Zealand because to gain that dollar-for-dollar student reduction, those graduates keep their skills here. They work for this country, they pay PAYE, they pay GST, they pay FBT if they're lucky enough to get a car in their job, and they pay resident withholding tax if they're lucky enough to save any money. So, sir, New Zealand First is supporting this bill because it's a bill of responsibility that all people with debt must face. But we are saddened that it has not thought wider. It is a shame we were not here to participate in the Select Committee process because we could have brought these concepts and possibly improved this amendment bill at that time. But for now, sir, we support this responsible bill and we'll be looking to the bill in the future. Thank you.
I call the honourable member Todd McLeod.
Mr. Speaker, thank you very much. It gives me pleasure to rise and speak on this bill.